secret chord. I'm missing some good stuff. What is M? Is M a
Yeah.
Roman numeral?
Yeah, it is. I don't know what it is, but I know it is one.
I don't know, but my guess is 50.
Well, should we Google it?
Yeah, somebody Google
Should
that.
we see? I
I'm
got
on
it.
All right, get on that.
To your spider fingers.
I think it's 1,000.
Like millennium. That's a way better guess.
This is John.
It is 1,000.
It's 1,000.
What?
Yep.
I shouldn't have guessed.
Yeah, 50 was dumb.
There's one.
Just kidding.
50 has a Roman numeral. I'm gonna double down on my bad bet.
Okay.
Yeah, it's L, I think.
Yeah.
Is it L?
I think so. But
Okay, math
he'll have to
major.
Google it to confirm.
Right. So, if you want to talk about the sinless nature of Christ, raise your left hand. If you want to talk about movies, raise your middle hand. And if you want to talk about fantasies, raise your right hand. Just like somewhere in here.
Wait.
But also it's backwards.
Or you can just talk about all of it. I don't care.
Let's talk about all of it.
Yeah,
Jason,
let's
this is like one of your last nights, man.
Yeah, I know.
What were you saying about movies? What did you want to talk about movies?
Oh, that was just something I wrote on my phone too, because I tried to make a video earlier about Fox and the Hound, because I was like, I've been wanting to do that for a while. And then there's like Pinocchio, there's all these great movies that are just,
Or we could talk about Mother!
have they seen
Exclamation
that?
point. Mother! Have you guys seen that?
Mm-mm.
No, it's on my to watch list. I really
It's
want to.
fantastic. You should definitely watch it.
It's great.
But we don't have to talk about that.
Or Black Swan.
Did you watch it recently, Natalie?
Black Swan. I watched it like maybe a month ago.
Oh.
But it's really good.
I remember when
Might
it came
tie
out,
into
I really
the
wanted to
sinless
see it.
nature of Christ.
Mm.
Probably not. But it's all an allegory for like a love story between God and earth.
Mhm.
But like I didn't know that going into it. And so when we started it, I was watching it with Jessie and she was like, man, the husband like kind of sucks. And I was like, he does, right? There's something about him that I just really don't like. And then we Googled it and I was like, oh, that's God. Dang. It's really interesting. But anyway, let's talk about something else. Fantasties?
I have a maybe a segue into Fantasties. It's something I've referenced before. Jason, you mentioned glass, and I'm going to share my screen here. Perhaps.
In glass. The Cosmos Magic Mirror.
Yes. Well, so I've got a friend, Stephen Reynolds, and Stephen Reynolds recommended me read G.K. Chesterton. And G.K. Chesterton writes this book called Orthodoxy. And it's about how he was trying to figure out what he believed and what was the right way to look at the world. And he has this conclusion where he says he just discovered an inferior version of Orthodox Christianity. But he's got this whole segment of the book called The Ethics of Elfland, where he talks about how fairy tales informed his ethics. And he's talking about this kind of implicit morality in all of the fairy tales. And this is a paragraph that really caught my attention with respect to Fantasties. So he says, I'll read it. Remember, however, that to be breakable is not the same as to be perishable. I'll make it bigger. Oh my goodness.
There we go.
Strike a glass and it will not endure an instant. Simply do not strike it and it will endure 1,000 years. Such it seemed was the joy of man, either in Elfland or on earth. The happiness depended on not doing something which you could at any moment do, and which very often it was not obvious why you should not do. Now the point here is that to me this did not seem unjust. If the miller's third son said to the fairy, explain why I must not stand on my head in a fairy palace, the other might fairly reply, well, if it comes to that, explain the fairy palace. If Cinderella says, how is it that I must leave the ball at 12? Her godmother might answer, how is it that you are going there until 12? If I leave a man in my will 10, oh my goodness, if I leave a man in my will 10 talking elephants, and 100 winged horses, he cannot complain if the conditions partake of the slightest eccentricity of the gift. He must not look a winged horse in the mouth. Sorry for reading this incorrectly. He must look a winged horse in the mouth. And if it seems to me that existence was itself so very eccentric, a legacy that I could not complain of not understanding the limitations of the vision when I did not understand the vision they limited. What a nightmare. The frame was no stranger. Veto might well be as wild as the vision. It might be as startling as the sun, as elusive as the water, as fantastic and terrible as the towering trees.
Wait, Q, hold on one second. I want to read the last part again. Or could the frame was no stranger than the picture. The veto might well be as wild as the vision. It might be as startling as the sun, as elusive as the waters, as fantastic as. Okay.
When
I'm
it,
not sure
when
I
it-
get it. Break it down.
Well, when it's saying the frame is no stranger than the picture, is it basically this idea that like the rules given are just as strange or are just as strange as like rules broken?
Totally. I think you're on the exact right track.
Huh.
He's talking about here. This feels like a great summary. Striking a glass, it will endure an instant.
Oh.
Do not
Luke's
strike
here.
it, and it will endure 1,000 years. Hey, Luke.
Did he hop in? I'm trying to admit him. There it goes. In case he. Luke's here.
Is he frozen?
No, I don't think so. It's probably his image hasn't loaded yet. But that's his picture. Is he frozen? Hey,
Cool.
Hi.
Luke, hi.
Hi, how are you guys?
Very
Hey.
well.
That's great.
we were just getting started. Craig was reading us something, and we are kind of gonna get into fantasies. So it's probably good because you read it.
No kidding. Great.
We've been goofing off for an hour, and now we're trying to get our business hats on and having a hard time.
Is someone sharing a screen because I see a document?
Yeah, that's Craig.
Yes.
We're
Sure.
reading that middle paragraph there. I don't know if we should read it again, but
So a quick setup. Maybe should we do a miniature setup again?
yeah, because
Okay.
I didn't really understand it. So
Well, so here's what we're up to. In light of reading Fantasies by George MacDonald, he uses a lot of imagery that's related to glass and breakable things.
Hmm.
And in our conversations in the past, I've referenced this passage in a G.K. Chesterton book called Orthodoxy. He has a section here, and it's called The Ethics of Elfland. And he's trying to get at what he thinks are the implicit morality, the morality principles that are present in our fairy tales. And the punchline here, this is the paragraph that we're looking at. But what he says is, we have this intuition that things like glass, you can strike them and they're instantly shattered forever. But if you never shatter them, they'll last an eternity. And he says, this is it right here. Such it seemed was the joy of man, either in Elfland or on earth, that happiness depended on not doing something which you could at any moment do, and which is anyway. So that's the gist of it here. And he goes on to talk about the strangeness of that rule. Like if you object that that's such a strange moral principle, he goes on to say, well, the whole thing is strange. And that's his defense against the criticism. But do you guys feel like this is something that you have an intuition for, that this is the way that morality works? Like when you have a good thing, it's going to persist forever if you don't damage it. But if you damage it, you've damaged it forever. I'll stop sharing.
Well, but this is saying the opposite of what you just said.
Say more.
Well, you're saying that if you damage something, it's gone forever. Is that what you just said?
Yes.
And then in the beginning of this, it's saying the opposite: strike a glass and it will not endure an instant. Well, okay, it's saying he will not endure an instant. Never mind. But breakable is not the same as perishable.
Hmm.
And like I feel like the whole paragraph is arguing against that idea of like you're told not to strike a glass, but like why are you told that? And like it's kind of like asking the question like who, it feels like it's asking the question like who made the rules, but I don't know.
Hmm. That could be.
I
Let's
could be
see.
wrong. I could be very
No, you could be very wrong. Now, the point here is, to me, that this did not seem unjust. It doesn't seem unjust that it should be this way.
So is he saying when he says, they say, don't stand on your head in the fairy palace, and you reply, explain to me the fairy palace, it's kind of saying, God, that's kind of asking the question, God, why did you frame it this way? Like God says, don't eat this tree, and you're saying, why did you?
Right. It's like, well, why, if in that metaphor, it sounds like he would say, if someone says, why is it that I shouldn't eat the apple? Why did God just put the apple there and tell me not to eat it?
Mhm.
Tell us not to eat it. He would
Yeah.
say this, they would say, that's not fair. It's unjust.
Yeah.
He says, the point here
I'd-
is that to me, this is not unjust because the whole thing is, why is it that you should have ever been allowed in the garden to begin with?
because that's where you start. That's just childhood. That's childlikeness. I mean, I have my answer for it. I don't know if it's right, but to me, the whole, like the reason for the don't eat the tree, like the reason for the tree is because of free will, like to choose your own identity, to choose, I know good and evil.
Mm.
It's like a concept of free will, and the serpent's your own pride in your heart. It's tempting you to play God. But the reason for the commandment, it's just my answer, I don't know if it's right, would be because you have brothers and sisters, because God wants to create more of you. So it's not that I'm trying to think of the right way to describe it. It's not that God's gonna lose out if you say, hey, I'm God and he's got it. It's like God's not gonna be offended by that or necessarily even damn you by that, but it's you damn each other. Because as soon as I say I'm God, then I'm saying you're lower than me and I judge you. Like it's playing judge basically, and God's saying you don't get to play judge in this. That's my thoughts. I'm not making it coherent at all. I'm really sorry.
No, I'm understanding
No,
what
I
you're
understand.
saying. I just don't fully understand. I think I'm confused about the question of the paragraph because I understand what you're saying, but I don't know that that's the question that I'm getting from the paragraph. Because
Mm.
to me, like all of the quotes or like not quote like quotation marks that they're using feel like you're just reframing a question, but you're answering a question by reframing a question. And I don't know what the question of the paragraph is because it's just like it's I mean like because to me that's like an answer of like you like shouldn't eat this fruit and here's why. But like in this paragraph it seems like hey you shouldn't stand on your head in a fairy palace and they're like what is a fairy palace? It's like or like are you going to be out till 12? Like it's just like that's not really answering my question. That's just reframing my question as an answer and I don't really understand if that makes sense.
I'm having a little trouble tracking with the paragraph as well. I think that's the only, and it's probably just because of the Bible. That's the way I'm trying to draw a parallel is saying like God says, don't eat of this tree. And I say, well, explain to me the garden sort of thing. I'm like, why is a tree here? Like what's this
But
garden?
but you would be the one saying you would be saying why can't I eat of this tree and then God would be replying explain to me the garden. Is that what you're saying? Because
No.
that's what the paragraph is saying. Like
Oh,
Cinderella is saying I like why can't I stay out till 12 and then the fairy godmother's like why would you be out till 12 and it's like
Yeah.
people out that late are cops and robbers.
I know like that would be an answer but that's not what she says. She's not like your dress will fall apart. She's just like, well, why would you? It's a little sassy. I don't know.
Do you have the impression that the garden story is your reaction to the garden story with the fruit in it, that it's not fair that the fruit was there to begin with, or do you feel like it's fine that the fruit was there?
Are we
you
asking
asking?
everybody?
Who are you
Yeah.
asking? Everyone?
Anybody who cares to answer. Does
I-
that bother you in any way that the fruit was there to be eaten?
No. I think that's
It,
totally fair.
it used to bother me until I think I spent time and thought with it, and then I kind of understood the garden more. What about you? I don't know. Luke, John?
Yeah, it bothers me.
It does?
But yeah, it's not, but that's because I'm immature.
No, I wouldn't say that.
So for me, no, it doesn't bother me at all. I think once I learned like that it had to be there out of necessity, it wasn't there. There are some things that just are because other things are. So like you have darkness because you have light, right? And I feel like the tree is a byproduct of free will.
Mhm.
And so it's not really like the tree was made specifically, it's that the tree is what was the byproduct of something else. And so with that framing, I don't have any issue with it. But I'm tracking with that paragraph, Craig. What do you think about it?
I feel like a lot of people have said interesting things. The fact that it's a consequence of free will isn't something that I considered when I read it. It seems like he's getting at.
Did you think about the Garden of Eden specifically as well? Was that like your...
That's what I have the impression that he's talking about. He's saying that's in the West, that's our underlying ethic, but it's also in our fairy tales. It seems like he's saying everybody has an intuition about shatterability. There are certain things that once you break them, they're done. That might otherwise have been perfect forever.
It reminds me of virginity.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because it's like you have a piece of art and it's saying don't defile it. Same thing, like an art is virgin, it's untouched. It's don't, like in the fairy tales you have that. What was it's in Fantasies. There's one point where she says, I think, and it's in the Green Knight as well. He reaches out to touch this girl and she's like, don't touch me. Like, why would you touch me? It's like, don't touch me. They like freak out. It's kind of this theme in kind of like fairyland. Like you don't touch the white lady.
Yeah, virginity was my first thought too, Jason. I don't think you're far off.
Is that, see, to me, and I mean, this is just my Christianity, of course, mapping onto it in the cross, but to me, I'm like, those things are not where they can't, they can be put back together. Like they're not broken forever. You got a question, Natalie? You look.
Well, no, I don't have a question. I'm just kind of like stuck on that. I don't know. The line about the frame is what, like I'm tracking with what you guys are saying, but also I'm still like the idea of like the frame being as, I forgot what he said, like as mysterious as the
I
picture
think
sort of thing.
from what I understand, the frame is creation. That's what I'm gathering, but I don't know if that's like we're confined into this box per se. Like we don't get to.
That's totally. I think you're totally on the right track. The frame, as in the boundaries, the rules. The rules of the garden are no stranger than the garden itself.
Yeah. So not like frame as in like a way of seeing something or perceiving something. I mean, I guess maybe you could use it that way, but I thought of it as
Wouldn't
just,
it be that way if
boundaries.
wouldn't it be that way if it's a question of morality? Wouldn't the frame be a way of seeing something if that's what this paragraph's talking about?
You mean frame
Like
in
a frame
different
of
sense?
mind. Like I don't know. That's
But
just what
I like that you're bringing up this question because then
I don't know. I really might be throwing out a lot of really dumb things,
Well,
but
that's a really good question, because he may be, the way I read it was that he was using frame in the sense of a picture frame, but he may well be using it.
Well,
and
no,
playing it that way.
I think he is, but like instead of thinking of it literally as like frame being like the world that we live in, frame is kind of like I mean, to me, it sounds like he's referring to like the frame as like the moral codes that we live by. And I could be wrong, because then in that regard, I have no idea what's in the picture. But so I could for
No,
sure be
I
off.
think you're getting on something really important. I'm just not quite sure how to explore it yet.
It feels like he's commenting on the fact that like we have moral codes that we don't always understand, which makes it just as strange as the life that we live, because we don't really know why we live it the way that we do, because we just follow these moral codes. I don't know. That could be wrong.
Hmm.
The frame in that, I mean, if I had to go the way you're talking about it, then the frame seems interchangeable, right?
Is
I
it?
mean, yeah, if it's a frame of mind, because like I said, they used to bother me, the idea of the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the garden, till
Hmm.
I have
Well,
kind of a change of frame of mind, and then I see it
could-
as not the tree of knowledge, but the tree of knowing good and evil, like just playing God.
Well, no, it could be interchangeable, because then it kind of goes back to this idea of reframing a question.
Yeah.
You know, it's like by reframing your mind, you're changing the frame that holds all of like your morals, maybe. Like, I mean, with all of these questions where like you're answering a question with another question, you're just
This is
reframing it.
this is
Well-
good. I'm starting to make connections, but this feels really important. Okay.
I'm feeling really convinced that what he's saying here is that if you have a problem with the rules, if you have a problem with absurd sounding rules, you might just as well throw out your criticism, because our entire experience is absurd. He says it might be as startling as the sun, the rules might be as startling as the sun, as elusive as the waters, and fantastic and terrible as the towering trees.
Mhm.
You know, he's saying it's all absurd, it's all terrible, it all is alarming.
I didn't make it as terrible or alarming. I think so. I mean, the first time I read this, Craig, and I'm
Yeah.
reading this one paragraph, right? So this is completely out of context
Of course.
with regard to the rest of the book.
I know.
So I don't really. I'm like now shooting in the dark. But I thought this was more of an encouragement than anything, because what would be better for Cinderella than to just enjoy being at the ball in the first place?
Mhm.
Right. So instead of, and I was thinking of the frame kind of like what you were saying, Jason and Craig, in terms of like the frame being the thing that holds all of this together, in which we as part of the picture live, and that would be creation or God or whatever you want to say. But instead of, I think if something really good happens to you and you know it's a blessing and it's something that you've prayed for and something really comes through and it's a great impact in your life, this is the immediate first thing that I thought of, instead of saying, or something really bad, instead of saying, why me, I have to figure this out. It's easier to even just ask, or then the question then becomes, instead of my own situation, why does any of this exist? Right? Like the fact that this random thing happened to me, this act of God happened to me, is no crazier than the fact that I exist or any of this exists in the first place. And that's the frame, being as absurd as the picture. And I don't think that's necessarily in a bad way, because I thought this was an encouragement to not strike the glass in a way, and just admire it for what it is, enjoy it, because you realize that if you strike it, it's breakable.
Hmm.
Is it a frame or the frame we don't have? I'm trying to figure out if children have frames, or in the garden, if we even come with frames, or the frame is then developed and then the frame has to be shattered. And then there's a return to framelessness or something. I don't know, but I was thinking about that idea of like a movement from I guess I'm trying to figure out what the breakability of for whatever reason my mind went straight to like the child being almost like this virgin, and then something does break and it feels like it cannot be restored, but then there's a movement back into childlikeness, but it almost takes like this impossible move, which is like frame shattering. I don't know.
That reminds me of Fantastes, my globe.
Yeah.
Has everybody read that part? Yeah, where he
Yeah.
shatters a globe,
Mm.
and the black mist comes out of it or something like that.
It's an interesting idea that children aren't born with frames.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
why I thought it was interesting to get into your idea of like a more of a mindset, or like your frame is a.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't know how I feel about it. I don't know that you're wrong. I just don't know how I feel about it.
I mean, we are
Like
framed.
you've read the book, Craig. Like, what's the context? What do you think he's getting at when he says frame?
In Orthodoxy, this book we were just looking at.
Yeah.
Well, my sense is he's drawing attention to the fact that in fairy tales, the princess lives in a glass house on a glass hill. There's one sees all things in a mirror. And okay, so he says it here explicitly. This is an expression of the fact that happiness is bright but brittle, like the substance most easily smashed by a housemaid or cat. My impression is that it's a Christian idea, but it seems like he's saying this is just an element of our experience, is things that are good thing. We have a lot of good things that are easily broken, permanently broken.
Like what?
And like peace, like you referenced virginity. There's a lot of things that are doable, but not easily or ever undoable.
Virginity is the only one I can really think of where that's the case, though.
What?
Virginity
Virginity.
is the only thing that I can think of that can't be rectified or pieced back together.
But see,
I'm
this
not-
is just me, but I would disagree, but that's just because I'm always going on about forgiveness and mercy, and I'm like that's
Yeah.
that's what pulls it back together. Like it makes in virginities, it's comparable in the physical realm, but the spiritual
Right.
reality of it is just like being dedicated, and being holy and set apart. Holy is probably the right word to use, but it rubs people the wrong way, because they have their. But I think it
Yeah. I feel the opposite of Jason. Actually, I feel like there are so many things that like are breakable that can't be undone.
Like
I feel
what?
like- I mean, I feel like, like spiritually, I understand where you're coming from, but like in a mind, like when you're focusing on your mind and like the things in your life that affect your brain, I feel like there are so many things and so many like instances in your life as you grow old. I mean, like look at who you are now versus who you are as a child. Like every situation that you've been in has affected your brain in a way that's created you to be the person that you are now. And those things cannot be undone. And it feels like
But
almost
does that mean it was broken?
not necessarily.
Even if we're not committed to taking this really hyperbolically, where we say there are things that can never be repaired, it seems to speak to the fact that there are a great number of things that are very difficult to build, but very easy to destroy.
Yeah.
You know, if you lit a fire in your house, you know, your house took months and months to build or more, as well as all the things in it, but you could destroy it instantaneously. And so there's just a fragile aspect to most of the good things in our lives that
So if he compares joy and happiness both to the glass, which I don't know what I think about joy being a particularly fragile state, but rolling with it, what does it mean to strike the glass in that sense?
Oh,
What does it mean to let it sit there and look at it? Like, that's what you want to do, but like, how do you do that?
Are we talking specifically about joy?
Sure. And then we can
Really-
move into more generally.
really takes me. Well, I think you could say that an easier comparison to me might be something like peace, because you have the glass. I don't think of glass, think of water, like what they in still waters be peace. But even with joy, it's just kind of, you know, what I'm always talking about, my dog. But before she died, I used to call her, that was a nickname I had for her, is I call her my joy. And then that got shattered. And then so it's things like that, maybe things like that where like you can't where it kind of gets shattered. You have this joy that you're living, yeah, with this, or you could even be in a relationship and you're just having this fun relationship, and then the person dumps you unexpectedly or something, and then your joy is gone, because that's where you put it all in that frame, I guess, in that category, maybe. Which what would be a good thing, right, Natalie? That ultimately that frame gets broken, and then your joy can spill over into
No, I was
into-
gonna into the world. No, I was gonna say that reminds me a lot of that ridiculously long podcast that you sent me that you were on.
Was
But
it with Craig?
No, it was with a bunch of people I didn't know.
Okay.
It was about universalism. But towards the end, not Sherry, but the other lady was talking about like to be or not to be. And to me, that feels like shattering joy. Because I mean, this isn't the case for everyone. It's obviously not the case for everyone, but like, I just feel like to choose not to be would be to choose not to feel joy. And in that way, you're shattering it yourself. Otherwise, I don't know how you shatter it yourself. I feel like other people can shatter it for you unless you choose not to be and to just not feel. And then you can shatter it.
That's
Because that's kind of what that seems like what they were talking about on that podcast. I don't know. It was 3 hours long, so like there were times I was fading in and out of it, but
no, that's a good point. And she's recently been reading the book of Job with people, and I think that's a good strong comparison as well.
And Job says like, would it better to have not been born at all or whatever? And that's like the whole question, like, would it be better to like never have been born? But then like Sherry said, like, when you can choose not to be by choosing not to like feel, and not like if you don't feel anything, you're not really a part of human society anymore, I guess. That could be wrong.
No, I like this. It's
A lot of silence.
no, it's good. I feel like you bring a really good perspective and take on it. I'm trying to connect the imagery with everything you just said. With the glass and the frame
With
and
the
the mirror and all
glass.
that
Well,
stuff.
that's just the only way I can imagine shattering joy yourself. Because otherwise, the examples that you were giving were like someone else shattered that for you. You didn't
I agree with that,
choose
Natalie.
things to happen to you. Like you didn't choose to do that, but like you can choose not to feel joy, and that would be shattering that glass.
So could I ask a question here and say, well, because my mind just jumped back to Fantasties again, and Cosmo's magic mirror, where we were originally kind of going to try to start, but he shatters the glass. His joy is in the glass, and he shatters it to to set it free. Does it remember that story?
Give us a recap of the story.
So Cosmo's magic mirror, he buys this mirror in this like kind of like sounds like a pawn shop or something, just a store, and then he puts it on his wall, and then he notices behind him this lady keeps walking into the frame, and so he starts he cleans his room, like Jordan Peterson says, he cleans up his room. So she'll like the place more because he sees he's got like a skeleton and stuff in there because he just like studies things. And so she's kind of disgusted by it a little bit, or you can see she doesn't really like it. So he cleans up the room, makes it really nice for her, and is trying to please her and all this stuff. And then he has no contact with her. So eventually he performs like some summoning ritual or something. And he has like a circle and does this spell, and then she ends up the actual woman comes into his room, and then I can't remember what happens exactly. I think that's when she asks him to shatter the mirror or something, and he hesitates, and then lightning strikes or something, and he goes unconscious, and then she's gone, and then the mirror's gone as well, and he finds out this other man has stolen the mirror. But he wants to find the mirror so that way he can, because he feels like he did her wrong. That was the one thing she asked of him. She was like, if you truly love me, then shatter the mirror. Like if you wouldn't keep me trapped in this mirror. And then so he has to go. Eventually he basically dies fighting the guy, but he shatters the mirror. He, like, I think goes to some party, finds out this information where the guy's going to be, gets into a confrontation with the guy, ends up shattering the mirror, but he gets stabbed in the process, and he meets the girl on the bridge at like the end when he's dying, but she's free because she's a real girl, but like something about her being trapped in the middle in the mirror, she's like deathly ill and she's gonna die, and this is how she gets healed again and is able to live again. So all that to say, I didn't know if that kind of tied in something to what you were saying, Natalie, about shattering the mirror yourself. Like if you have this joy in the mirror and you see it constricted or something, I don't know. Are there circumstances where you can, I don't know what I'm getting at, shatter the glass?
Does the frame broaden, like if when you rebuild it, like your concept of joy, for instance, you break it, you release it, you probably have to rebuild a frame around it, otherwise you have no concept of it. But I wonder if that is a way of a necessary process in order to expand one's conception of what joy is, or deepening one's understanding of joy, or any other word you could choose, like an intangible like that, like they're not really I don't know what the substance of joy is, or
Do you think, Craig, that we're thinking too deeply about the meaning of joy in this context? Is it like in Chesterton's words, like that was right on the heels of talking about fairy tales? So it makes me think about Phantastes too, and it makes more sense if it's not specifically joy that we're talking about. So there was that few lines in chapter 3 or 4 where he's walking along and he's noticing all the funky things going on, and he makes a comment like, and I didn't even notice it anymore. I chose not to think critically about it because they were all just fantastic, and you begin to expect the unexpected. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And so if I'm equating what he's talking about joy to fairy tales, one way that he could shatter the joy, and one way that the guy in Phantastes' joy is delicate in that sense, would be to stop and recognize how ludicrous everything is, but instead he chooses just to look at it and admire it, and to realize that that is just in a frame of fairyland that is also equally as chaotic and crazy.
Right.
So do you think we're over analyzing the fact that he says joy and happiness by thinking of it in terms of like a spiritual sense or a sense of or a state of being rather than like an experience. Does that make sense? Like the ball could be a joyful experience. Cinderella going to the ball could be joyful.
The question you're asking makes a lot of sense. That to emphasize joy isn't my default instinct. That's not to say it's not fruitful. I wanted to see what you guys thought was there. My default interpretation is to ask if this pattern is showing up in all of our stories, what does that reflect about the world we live in? If there's a pattern, if there's an abstraction, what's it getting at? What's it about? And I don't think it's joy specifically, but I think we've touched a lot of things that are really interesting to explore. We talked about, Jason, I think you talked about death, and that feels to conform to the pattern really heavily. And we talked about relationships ending. I'm curious if death strikes you guys as a meaningful direction to explore.
Be happy to go there.
Does it seem like that fits it conforms to the pattern of the fragile glass?
It feels like it does more so than like joy does, because when you brought up like reframing in a bigger frame, joy does feel more like an example of like, if your house burns down, can you rebuild it bigger? You know, it feels more like that rather than like glass being broken. I mean, I guess you could still think of it that way, but I think death is a little more final than others.
Your house burns down, you could build it bigger.
Or like he said, he's saying like, can you build the frame bigger and hold more joy?
My
Or
first thought is that. Sorry, go ahead, Luke.
I wouldn't even say more joy. Well, I mean, it would, but it would include an understanding of its opposite. So it's like whatever the opposite of joy is, misery, you know, because I would assume that the breaking of the glass would include the death of whatever that frame held together. And so it's like my immediate thought goes straight to the absence of whatever that thing is. And so then now the absence informs the lack of whatever that substance is, also informs what, when you reframe it, what that substance now includes. And so it's like, so the depth of joy is increased. So it's not necessarily, it's more joy, but it's not necessarily like bigger joy. It's like deeper joy.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know if that makes sense, but
It does. It feels like something we're dancing around is that in our experience, there's varying degrees of recoverability. Like if you shatter your joy, you can recover it. If you shatter your house, you can recover it. On the other end of the spectrum, there's things like death, or we talked about maybe virginity is in this category. There's things that we seem to feel like have a sacred importance, and maybe the sacredness is a function of the unrecoverability, the unrepairability. We feel that way about art too. You know, when you go into a museum, you have these things and they're roped off, and we all have a respect for them because we know you can't recreate that because the creator is passed away, that it came from a different time, and so it's sacred in that sense.
You know, Bill Watterson, I don't know if this is a true statement, but I think I heard this from my cousin Chris. He goes down and he will draw this meadow by his house. I don't know why. This was years ago that I heard this, so I have no idea if this is true. But then he'll just throw it away afterwards. And I feel like I don't know. I feel like there's a deep understanding to that idea that that I'm dealing with the glass. I'm dealing with the reflection of the true thing. Like, because we feel that way. Like, we feel that way about art, or we feel that way about anything material. It's like we have the and virginity and all this stuff. We feel like it's unrecoverable. Like we can't get it back. But it came from somewhere to begin with, wherever that place was. And I feel like this kind of touches a little bit at what I definitely need to think about more, but just the idea of memory. Like why would I remember uh, it? Why would I remember something in its virgin state? Like that seems like torment. Why not just forget it? It seems like there's something to do with the Garden of Eden, untouched, virgin. Why is that still something I desire if I can't get it back? You know. And then, it kind of gets. I don't know what I'm getting at. I feel like I'm just rambling in circles here now. But like, Bill Watterson went and drew the Garden of Eden or something, and then he has it, and then it's just like there's more. You know, like what you just. I don't know. It gets at that idea. I think I'm always getting at where it's like I just always. It's like there's always more. It's like I have the garden now, but it's like the book Fantasy starts off that way. He sees this ocean or something, and he says, "There must be an ocean like this somewhere." And it says, and this voice responds to him, "In fairyland." And it's so you see the Garden of Eden. You're like, there must be. And I think when Peugeot, sorry, I'm like everything's coming out really scattered. I think Jonathan Peugeot talks about this in terms of faith. Like you would see an apple, and then you'd think, "Oh, there must be an apple tree." And so you'd be almost inclined to throw away the apple and go after the apple tree. Then you get the apple tree and you think, "Oh, there must be an apple orchard." And so it's like but we have this something inside of us that I think is, like you're getting at, Craig, is definitely necessary because it's not right to throw away the apple tree. Like we still want to keep we don't just want to burn the forest down looking for the greater thing. You know, it's like is any of this making sense? It's making sense in my head, but it's not coming out right in words.
Jason, we lost you. You were talking about an apple orchard and then you cut off.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll try to go back into it. So Peugeot, when he talks about like faith, he says faith is just the next leap. Like you have the apple, and then you think there must be an apple tree. You see the apple tree, then you think, well, there must be an apple orchard. And so you just keep jumping these levels of like there's more, there's greater. But then what I ended that with was like, it seems like what you're saying, Craig, I think is very important also, that it's not right to just like, I don't know that it's right to just throw away the apple or whatever's virgin, like, hey, let's just get rid of it because there's got to be more or something. I don't really know. I don't really know what I'm getting at. Like I wouldn't destroy the one apple tree so that I could have the orchard type thing. Does that make sense?
You wouldn't destroy the one apple tree so that you could have the orchard.
Yeah. I feel like I just talked in a bunch of weird circles and didn't connect anything, and none of it made sense in my head, and it just didn't come out at all. Like, and I started with this
No.
weird Bill Watterson thing, and I'm like, I don't even know how that connected anymore.
Well, it reminds me of what I mentioned to you, Jason, that I was talking to Jessie about the other day. I was telling her about this book, and she brought up the idea of like the garden as like a realm that we are cursed not to see. Like part of the curse of man is that we like can no longer see what we used to be able to see. So I feel like there's never going to be a time where we don't have that longing for something that was given to us initially that we no longer have, if that is true. If that's something that like, so I feel like you paint a portrait of the garden, like that's cool, but like it's not going to have everything because we only have what we can see. We only have what we understand, and we're missing a piece of something. According to that theory, we would be missing a piece of something. And he even like, I mean, he basically says that in the book. when I was reading it today, he said, was page 77 for me. It's probably not anything for you guys, but he's basically talking about like, do you want me to just read it? Is that going to be annoying?
No, please.
Okay. Says, they who believe in the influences of the stars over the fates of men are, in feeling at least, nearer the truth than they who regard the heavenly bodies as related to them merely by a common obedience to an external law. All that man sees has to do with man. Worlds cannot be without an intermundane relationship. The community of the center of all creation suggests an interradiating connection and dependence of the parts. Else a grander idea is conceived than that which is already embodied. The blank, which is only a forgotten life lying behind the consciousness, and the misty splendor, which is an undeveloped life lying before it, may be full of mysterious revelations of other connections with the worlds around us than those of science and poetry. No shining belt or gleaming moon, no red or green glory in a self-encircling twin star, but has a relation with the hidden things of a man's soul, and it may be with the secret history of his body as well. They are portions of the living house wherein he abides. Does that make sense? There's a lot of things, but I don't know. It feels like it's like encompassing that idea of like there are hidden things in a man's soul that like we don't understand. Like there's like a garden that we can't get to.
Yes.
And there's like realms that we don't know. And it just feels to me like that is like when she said that the other night, I was like, wow, that like feels like the curse of man to like be stripped of the garden that way. And we have this idea that it's like a place that no one can find, but it could just be like a realm that I can find, which sounds really dumb when you use that word. There's other words that probably would be better, but like, I don't know. It's interesting.
I think you're 100% right.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I think so too. And that's basically exactly what Jason was saying as well.
Yeah, I think so.
Was that memory can kind of be like tormenting. Because you have like a picture of it, of the ideal, the unreachable ideal.
And I like, even if you could return to the ideal or what have you, it's like, would it satisfy you? Like there's something that needs to remain elusive about it. And that's part of how it operates on the will and our desires. So it's like,
Hmm.
it's if it were to be satisfied, you would no longer seek it.
Hmm. Is there, we've said a lot of it. We say it is this way, it is that way. What's an appropriate name for the it that we're talking about?
The sweetness.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think to
The
me, I
apple.
think it can be anything. Sorry, is this weird?
No, I like it.
I'm going to turn my light off too.
Yeah, me too.
Trying to play into that elusiveness. It was just everybody was like frozen for a while for me, but I kept getting audio, so hopefully it got everything. But like everybody was frozen, so I figured it was probably me. But I would think it can be whatever, like whatever your heart's desire is a cheesy way to put it, right? Because that we're
Yeah.
talking about kind of like longing, right? For the garden.
Yeah, I was about to say it feels like man's longing for something more. Like that's really all it feels like is like.
Yeah, so I was kind of playing as you guys were talking. I was just kind of going through my head because I was kind of trying to play through scenarios because
You weren't listening.
no, I was trying to listen, but like, well, because you're talking about the garden wanting to get back to it. And I know I've mentioned you, Natalie, before. I was like, what was it, like last Christmas or the Christmas before? I was like, it feels like everything I want is in the past.
Oh
I
no.
feel like I had it all. Like it feels like like the Shire, like Frodo leaving the Shire,
yeah.
and you're just like, God, I used to have a garden,
Mm.
used to have a dog, used to have like this perfect life, and now it's all gone. But it's like I guess I was just thinking in my head, like, I don't look at pictures that much anymore because they seem to just be very unsatisfactory,
Mhm.
But then I'm like, the actual dog, if I had my actual dog again, like, I wouldn't kill her so that way I could have some mystical, dreamlike version of her, eternal version of her. But it still is, I guess I'm trying to get back to the idea of like you not wanting to break it apart or shatter the glass or something. Like, I don't think I wouldn't purposely do that. But then at the same time, it's like kind of even getting at when Craig brought up death. It's like sometimes it just feels like a matter of perspective to me, because it's
Mhm.
like there's more now. Like, and it took me a while to experience that, but it's like, you can, I have the memory, but then the memory is also, um, more boundless. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
it's like even this body, when I die, it's like it'll be so sweet because it's like it's like you're shedding the tent sort of thing. You're uh I mean, you're as long as you go to sleep in love and forgiveness, I think your dreams would be just only those, and you wouldn't be in some torments of Hades or nightmares or bitter resentment. And I think you would, I mean, if it is how I truly believe and your spirit's real and you go on to other things, I think you would still want a body. And I think that's why there is all this emphasis on like the resurrection of the physical body, because it seems like any spirit does want a body, like any idea, any thought, you want to materialize it and make it things. But it seems like once you do that, like, it kind of like you're talking about, there's still this longing, Natalie, and you just want it to be more. Like, we've kind of talked about this idea a little bit more as well, like in the when he finds the alabaster lady in Fantastes, it's like she came from this artist's mind. It was this idea, this spiritual idea of this lady. It was in the heavens, and he put it into stone, and then Anotos finds her and just wants her to be alive. It's like,
Yeah.
it's and same thing with, I think, these bodies too. We're longing for the body that doesn't like get sick and ill and like all this stuff. It's like we know we want to shed this tent to get another one, and it's like, I don't know.
Let me
You
ask you a
don't know.
question about that. Go ahead, Natalie.
Oh no, I was just clarifying. Like, you don't know if it'll ever satisfy. Is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, I kind of hope it doesn't, but I think that's just me, because if Mitch were in here, I think he would say that there's gonna be a rest and we will be satisfied, and
Mitch would say that.
and I think
I was
there's
actually
something
just
to that.
thinking
I do think there's something to that idea, because but then I mean, to me, I'm like, I just want to further up and further in, as
Well, it's
C.S.
almost he's almost right just by definition, because our definition of this thing, we have an intimation of the ideal place or the ideal way of being. And part of the definition of it is that it's satisfying.
It's the what is it? The land before time. What's the place we always talk about? My goodness, you and me going about the promised land imagery in that movie.
Yeah, but part of me is this is gonna take the conversation in a really weird direction.
Do it.
But part of me, when you are talking about like getting a new body and like spirits always longing for something physical, or like even like having an idea and wanting to like make it. It's like cool once you make it, like it goes back to that idea of like the artist and the art. Like once you've done that, it's like it's there, you've lost all mystery. Someone said that earlier about mystery, and like it just like it feels like when you lose the mystery of something, it does lose its satisfaction in a small way. And I don't know why that is. And
Yeah,
I don't know if that ever goes away. But it's like
I'm sorry, I'm too eager.
No, say it.
Are you talking about when something that's just pure potential?
Yeah.
It's so rich and mysterious because it has infinite potential, but it
Mhm.
loses all that potential when it becomes actual.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that idea of like, well, because if we think about, I feel like this is a bold statement, but I feel like if we think about potential and like art or whatever, you know, in terms of like feminine and masculine, then the way that we think about heaven is purely masculine. And so I'm like, if there's no mystery still, if there's no feminine there, we won't be satisfied. So there has to be more than what we've written it to be or what we've thought of it to be. And there is, that's what people say. It's like more than you can imagine, more than you can think. There's more colors than, or whatever, you know, like all sorts of stuff. There's supposed to be all this mystery behind it. But then if we're there and we're satisfied, then it's like, where is the feminine?
Right. Like if it, so I agree with what you're saying. It feels like when we say, well, you could say if it wasn't satisfying, if it wasn't still mysterious, it wouldn't be the promised land.
Yeah.
And so if it has to be both, it's almost like when people say, there's this cheesy thing that people say, if it's not okay, it's not the end.
Yeah.
Is it like that?
Yeah, kind of. I guess.
What does
It's
that
a-
mean? If it's not okay, it's not the end.
It's just a dumb thing that people say. They post places to comfort each other. They say everything's going to
Oh,
be okay in the end. If it's not okay,
gotcha.
then it's not the end. But it
It's
sounds
like
like this place, like by definition, has to be both totally satisfying, but also totally unreachable.
Yeah, we're not going to be satisfied with the representations. And that's even like Plato's critique of art. And I don't know how Aristotle rescues it exactly, but it was like at least good art still alludes, and that is it's it doesn't even, it almost doesn't represent in any sort of like propositional way. It doesn't define. It always is pushing the audience or the viewer or whatever beyond the representation to, well, for them it would be the universal or whatever. So
Hmm.
I don't know.
I think you're getting at you're contacting something that seems really related. We brushed on, there's kind of a different kind of ideal, like an intimation of the ideal, where it's not an intimation of the ideal place, but you use representational, like there's intimations of the ideal way to be as a person. And that's related to the idea of Christ. And we have a sense in general in the West, I feel that Christ was so profound because he was both limitless and like a representation. Like he was both potential and
Yeah,
limitation.
the concrete universal is what I keep on throwing that around as like
Concrete universal.
who Christ is. You know, it's like,
But that seems like it suggests that there's maybe a problem. There's something that's innately unsatisfying about Christ because he's so particular.
but it's also
Or do we
his
feel that way?
particularity that makes him so satisfying.
What makes him so satisfying?
His particularity.
Hmm.
That's also but that's, I don't know.
Yeah, because you need a name to you need an identity in order to have a relationship with it. And I think that's the satisfying part about it, is it's like here, like in Job wants that. He's looking at God and God's just out there in space. And he's like, you're not a man like me that we could go to court together. Like you're the, when God shows, like reveals himself, what he's I am. Like then the Jewish people have, like, he's the name that can't be named, because as soon as you name God, it's idolatry, because you're reducing him into my understanding of the world, whatever that name means. I'm putting God in a box in this category. But it's like you have to do that in order to relate to him. Like you can't just be
Yes.
this disintegrating ethereal thing all the time. So I think that is the part about Christ where you're like, eat my flesh, drink my blood. It's right here. Like I can touch you, I can taste you, I can handle you, I can I think that's the satisfying part, is it's like, yeah, the infinite was embodied. Psalm 136 just came and became a man. You know, it's like his mercy endures forever, just literally was at its fullness in this finite thing. Oh no, I disappeared again, didn't I?
You did.
Yeah.
Can you see how confused we all are?
Yeah, I got it, like froze, everybody's frozen, and then all of a sudden you're
What, can you repeat what you said? I'm sorry.
I said I don't know if I can now. I don't know where it stopped. So
You're gonna get so many bugs in your house if you don't close that door.
anyway, where did it cut out?
I should close mine.
Do you remember the exact point? I feel like Craig does.
You were
Ah,
saying, you were
oh,
talking about Job and how Job was longing for
God, all
something
the way
concrete
back
to have,
then.
to have a relationship
Good
with.
Lord.
I don't know if that's it exactly, but
No,
Um,
no, 'cause
no.
I think it's a little after that, because you were also saying like it's like eat my flesh, drink my blood. It's something that you can like physically, like tangibly taste, and that's what's like satisfying about it, is that it's like reachable and attainable.
Yeah, and you can relate to it, and it's like
Let's-
the infinite became finite. And what I ended with
what's
was
it's paralyzed.
it's Psalm 136, like is just being embodied in the man, the mercy. His mercy endures forever. His mercy endures for. That's the one refrain in the Bible where it's like, this is infinite. This is the boundless thing, sort of. And it's like
Yeah.
that actually became something we could actually relate to.
But
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Natalie.
I'm sorry, Craig. We're like bouncing all over each other. I just don't understand. Like, it doesn't feel to me like relatability and understanding are the same as satisfaction. And that feels like what you gain from having a tangible God. But like, on the other hand, if you look at him in the way of like also fully God, or even in the concept of like a piece, like we're looking at a piece of art, and like you or like you were saying, like Plato, right, talking about like everyone's ideas of like what heaven is and how we won't fully comprehend it, and like just like the subjectivity of it, and then that is what makes it keep its mystery, I guess. And it's the combination of the two what's so satisfying. And is that why we're more satisfied with, that's a really bold statement, but is that why we're more satisfied with like the Christ image than some people are with like the image of just the Father?
Yeah. Well, I'm with you. It does seem like there is this more potential thing, or a more elusive thing that you just can't interface with it in any way, because it's not particular at all. And so that kind of infinite ground of being and potential, it's almost like it puts on we talk about it like it's God, but God is like it wears God's like clothes. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
A God is like a garment for this thing, because if it didn't have a garment, then it just is uninteractable. But it doesn't mean that we don't long for the thing itself.
Hmm.
Does that sound like nonsense, or I'm curious?
And that then necessitates the incarnation, or I guess I was trying to figure out where you're headed with it.
Are you saying
Well,
go ahead.
what it seems like it implies, and I know a lot of people would hate this, but it feels like this is an inherent kind of limitation of Christ, or like a weakness of Christ. Like Christ, it feels like is he's in some ways less than we could conceive of.
He had to become lack. You know, yeah, I don't know. This plays off some video I was watching earlier today about Peter Rollins and all those, you know, that which God's lack is that which God lacks is lack itself. Therefore, he, I mean, that in by which God could even identify with man, or by which we could identify with God, God had to become lack
Well,
in order for us to participate in that which doesn't lack. What the hell am I saying?
you know what I'm curious about the fact that we can sit here and we can talk about, we could have a conversation about the ways where Christ wasn't perfect or where he's not satisfying. And because we can, it seems like it leads to all these questions about his perfection. Like there's an aspect of him that is totally unsatisfying because we still have to talk about whether or not this, like, Christ is the right way.
So I don't want to like take us back 8 steps, but
Do it.
I think it would be helpful to define what we mean as a collective when we talk about satisfying. Because it's satisfaction from food is a very different satisfaction from an outing, which is a different satisfaction of your understanding of a spiritual being. So when you talk about satisfaction, Craig, what are you referencing when you say Jesus Christ is not satisfied? And like, I partially agree with you, right? I want to nail down that terminology.
I feel like what makes the most sense is like a lack for wanting more is what by definition I feel like satisfaction would be. If you're satisfied, you don't want any more. But I mean that could mean something different to you guys.
No, see, I think I completely agree with you, Natalie, but I think in a way Jesus was the most wait, say that one more time. Satisfaction is a lack
for wanting more. Were you about to say Jesus was the most unsatisfying?
Yeah.
Because it kind of feels that way.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
And it feels like that's what heaven should be too. I don't think it should be satisfactory, because if it is, then that means it's answered all of our questions. And if we have no more questions, there's nothing more for us to learn. And then if there's nothing more for us to learn, then aren't we just like God himself?
Right. Well, that's what Luke was saying, is like once the mystery and the potential is removed from the ideal is no longer the ideal, because the ideal has to be something that's floating out there. So
Yeah.
In a way, I mean, I know Jesus was perfect, but in a way, through this logic, Jesus was perfect for what he was sent to do, because he was the least satisfying thing that you could have ever had in that regard, right?
Well, it's like, what's weird is I'm just thinking about Jesus as the way, and it's like maybe that sheds a little light on it, but it's like the way to what? The way to final participation, the where there is, because that's what I think is fullness, like and I'm thinking of the garden and belonging there. I don't know. And not being exiled from it, or not being forbidden to partake in it.
Would you say he was a person who was living in the garden on earth?
He says the kingdom of heaven is within you. So I would be inclined to say maybe yes. Yeah, I would think so, because I think anybody can live there. but maybe I've just reduced my views. That I can't get at it. Like, I can't say I reduced my views because it doesn't make sense to me any other way like I used to see it. How I've reframed things now just like is the only way it makes sense in my head. And it has to do around with basically the Logos being in a vessel of mercy. The Logos is on the mercy seat, and that's how everything works. Like, I don't care what the hell your God is. It can be anything. Like, it can be goodness, it can be truth, it can be beauty. You can exalt whatever you want, because we all have like our own ideas of what's most important to us. We all have our own telos, our own end goal, like our own purpose in life. But if that highest good, our most high, is not sitting on like a throne of mercy, then it just creates like either chaos or tyranny or something. But it's like, if it's on mercy, then it's like, if that Logos, whatever's inside of me that I think is most high, that I'm going after, if I make myself a vessel of mercy for that to reside in, then I think, to me, that's something like the garden, because it keeps me humble. And to me, the Garden of Eden just boils down to pride and humility. And so I think that's I feel like, God, I feel like I'm doing terrible in this conversation tonight.
No, you're not.
You said something really interesting.
Sorry, God.
Well, you said I don't want to reduce anything, and it felt like what you were doing was not reducing at all, because if what you're suggesting is that he is Luke, you said he's the way, and it sounded, Jason, like you were saying that he is the way back, like he's the way to, his way of being was the way to that garden state, that Eden state, which is, I mean, the implications of that is, I don't pretend to know them all, but you said
it feels
if
simple.
that's true, he's not something to be accepted. He's someone to be emulated. But that's pretty different than the way that a lot of people react to him.
Yeah. I mean, I think I see what you're saying. Yeah, he's something to be. He is a way to follow. Something that confuses me a little bit is I don't know why Christ was resurrected and Stephen wasn't, because it's like the same freaking thing. And so like Stephen was emulating Christ. Does that make sense? Stephen the martyr. So to me, I think that's ultimately the Christian way. I think maybe in accepting him, where it comes to accepting him, is actually I'm trying to think of the right way to get at this. The importance of the acceptance of the idea that the infinite actually became finite, like the story actually touched man, because I think all the ancient stories have this idea of a son of God, and it's never actually embodied, or if it does, it seems to just like not it doesn't. When
Yeah,
the son
I know
of
what you mean.
when
It's
the
like
son of God, when the son of God becomes man, throughout all the stories, like all the stories can have this, and anyone can be a son of God. It just depends on who your God is. But you get to this point and you go all the way up the mountain, and then you're king, right? And so the son of God always becomes king. But Jesus, like, he's at the top of the mountain, and then he becomes the martyr. It's like this extra leap where it's just like,
Yeah.
and it's just, and becoming the martyr, like, not only ascends to heaven, but it like descends to hell and just pulls all together. And it's just, yeah,
Yes.
I think that's maybe where the acceptance comes, is that you look at it and you're like, this actually happened. Like someone actually, which would be the infinite God, I guess, the divine love, mercy that creates and holds all things together, actually came to its fullness in a man. There's something, I think that's maybe
there's something special, because we could imagine a world where the Viking god Thor was perhaps a real person, and he was godlike, but it's like as if there's something special about Christianity because it's as if lightning has been striking, but this is the time that it caught fire. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm not sure what to do with that.
I don't know, but it was good.
I didn't really understand your reference to Stephen. Can you explain that to
Steven,
me?
because the story is just so parallel. Like he Stephen the martyr, and it's like Acts, I think chapter 7 or something. He basically he goes to the Jews and they get mad at him, and then he basically just lays out the truth, the logos. He's like, here's your history, here's what happened. You all missed the mark, you sinned, you even killed your savior, sort of thing. Like he just basically just throws them and says, here's the truth, you didn't live up to it, which you can kind of do with anybody because we all have an ideal we're aiming at and we're always going to miss it because like you said, it's infinite, we're never going to necessarily hit it. So he just says, here's the truth, here's the logos, and then they pick up stones to kill him, and then he says, forgive them, Lord, they don't know what they do. Like he responds the same way Christ is. He just like, he says, he looks on the people that are killing him and says, they're just children, like they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like, even though they're claiming to know what they're doing, he's like, they're not infinite like you, God, they don't know what they're doing. And so he just even in embodying the truth and holding to the truth, it's like he encompasses it in this forgiveness, this vessel of forgiveness and mercy. And so it's like, I mean, to me it seems like the same thing Christ did. That's why I'm like, Christ got to rise 3 days later, like why didn't Stephen? I don't know, I haven't thought about it enough, but it's just something that's come to my mind before. It's probably
It ruined the story. You can't
That's
have the
true.
same thing happen twice.
Yeah,
This is bad. That's just bad writing.
yeah. Yeah. That's true. That's true. Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like this is again, stop me if I'm going too off base, please. But like you guys are talking about like Christ being defined as the way, and like it reminds me of like the pilgrimage, like you're walking like on the Camino, they call it the way. That's what you're walking on. You're walking to Santiago. And when you get to Santiago, literally no one cares. Like nobody cares. You get there and you're like, cool, I made it. I have this certificate. I stayed in line and like had a number and they gave me this piece of paper and like it's printed and it's not even handwritten. And like no one cares about Santiago. Your best memories are all along the way. And like, and they even have a saying, you keep talking about like what is it, deeper in and deeper up, further in and further up.
Further up and further in.
Sorry, sounded really bad when I used the word deeper, but there's a saying on the Camino and it's go further and go higher. Like that's what they say. It's ultrea and sustea. It's all the same concept. And it's like with Christ, like when you're on the way, when you're following Christ as the way, you want to go further and go higher. And I think like for me, a deep fear when I was a kid, and I told Jason this, I was like terrified of heaven because I was like, once I get there, what am I going to do? There's nothing to do there. I don't want to be on my face 24/7 praising the Lord, no offense, but like I would like to be doing other stuff too. And so like it's just this idea of like even still, sometimes I think about heaven, and if I think about it too much, it freaks me out because I'm like, I'm not ready to be there yet. I'm enjoying the way. I mean, like I'm not always enjoying it, but it's like it's a way, and that's what forms who you are. And I think, I don't know, Jason and I talked a lot about like the image of heaven and how like it's changed for him. And like when he described it to me, it helped me a lot because I always felt like, oh, I'm gonna like die and poof into a new person that's like perfect because I'll be fully satisfied and I won't want anything else and I'll never sin again and I'll just be an entirely different person because that's not who I am now. So it's just like, I don't know. I think this idea of like Christ being the way is like really important, but I think we get so focused in on like the way to what, and it's like that doesn't really matter. He's just the way.
Yeah.
So he's just the journey, and that's what we need to focus on. We don't need to focus on the end. It's not that important in the grand scheme. Not as important as the way, in my opinion.
Yeah, because I think you're on something, because I think the end is the way. Because it's unending, right? Like
Yeah,
it's, the
maybe.
journey is like, once you live, if you're living life emulating Christ and living like him and living in a state of love and appreciation and thankfulness and all that stuff, it's like that's eternal. Like, so it's
Yeah,
the
that's
way,
it. Yeah.
the way is the end. Like, if it all began in love, if it all began in self-sacrificial love is what creates, that's eternal. It keeps on creating. And so it's, yeah, there really is no, I don't want to say there isn't an end, because obviously there's ends to certain things, but it's like there's always just a cycle. Like an end is a beginning, and so there is an end. But yeah,
So in that way, if we circle back to the beginning, then heaven's not going to satisfy, because in that way, like God is continually creating, because he's a creator. That's what he does. So if heaven is just going to be a continuation of the way, then there's always going to be mystery, and there's always going to be a longing in us for more. And so it will never satisfy.
All I'm thinking of is The Great Divorce right now
I haven't read that.
by C.S. Lewis, where I shouldn't spoil it then because it is pretty good.
spoil
But
it.
Tell us about it. It's been
Yeah,
around for
please.
it's been around for a long
Should have
time.
read it by now.
Yeah. Well, like man, I'll probably flub around, but these people are living in a mundane city, and they get on a bus, and the bus takes them to this other place, and they get off the bus. Anyways, this place that they're at is heaven, but it's not even recognizable as heaven. But like, for instance, like the main character, and I can't even remember the names, but the grass, like he gets off the bus and tries to walk, and he can't even walk on the grass because the grass is too sharp. So like he has to like build a tolerance to the grass. He has to form calluses on his feet before he can even walk in this place. And like he doesn't know really what's going on, and then he finally begins to realize that this place is heaven. So he has to become more real, because like he's watching other people who have just gotten there, who like immediately die because a butterfly flies right through them, and like like that, like that's how real. But he's like a shell, he's like almost like a transparent entity, or like he's so soft he can't handle heaven, and then yeah, anyways, so that like once you get to heaven, it's just like having to, at least for C.S. Lewis, and I know that everybody can have their own imagination when it comes to what heaven could or would be like, or final participation or what have you, but I can't even imagine that it would be like just this final state of rest so heavy. Like there's just the, like, what if it's just like an adjustment to like actually what the real is, because the real is just like, I don't even know. You get what I'm trying to say. But that book is, I probably did a terrible job summarizing it. It's well worth the read, and I won't spoil the ending because that's really good too.
It almost sounded like you were going to tell us that when he was stepping on the sharp grass, he realized that he was in hell.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be funny.
The thing is, like, what if it's almost like a new starting place, like, and it does feel like hell, because like it's gonna pierce your feet. It's painful.
Yeah, growth is painful. Which is ironic because I feel like we're usually told like there's no more sorrow, no more pain.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the
Like-
Bible says that, so that's why. I think that's why we're
Yeah, I
told that.
know, but like,
Yeah.
You say when your tears will be wiped away.
yeah.
Like right when you get there.
No, probably not.
Just periodically.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to add on to that. That's good.
Yeah, that is good.
Mitch did say something to me one time though that stuck with me. He said, we don't need to think about rest in the form of stasis or like a repose or a conclusion, I guess to say." And because we butt heads on this stuff a lot, but it's great. That's why I like it. I think I've been chewing on that because because I have this perception of rest when I come into rest as it being a repose or like a conclusion or the closing the book or the end or something like that. And I think it's maybe the way in which Mitch perceives it is like a mode of being. So you're continually going, creating or expanding further up and further in, but you're just in a state of rest. Which I'm gonna definitely have to chew on that because Jesus says this one thing that's never made sense to me ever, where it says God rests on the seventh day, and then Jesus comes and he says, "Until now, my Father has been working, and I have been working." And I'm like, hey, I thought God rested at some point. Like he never stopped. So it's like what is he working or is he resting? Like what's going on here? I don't know. And so I don't know if there's something to that where Mitch like kind of has this, the way he conceptualizes rest is something similar to that. And I just hasn't clicked for me yet. I don't know.
Hmm.
Because I don't really want to
Are there-
live in a state of turmoil all the time. Like it'd be nice to live in a state of rest. So I think there's something to that, but
Right.
Sounds just like a state of peace.
like a what?
A
Oh,
state of
peace.
peace.
I
What do you
thought you
think I said, Herb?
I was thinking penis. I thought you said peas, like the little green vegetable. I was like, what?
Yeah.
So I'm curious for everybody's impression. Is it more compelling for you guys as individuals to think of heaven as a destination that's perfect, or to think of it the way Natalie described it, where it's a state that you can participate in? Is it something that you bring down into your own experience? Which one is more compelling?
The second, the latter.
I choose both. I'm that guy. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Because a thought I've had recently is the end, any sort of conclusion is with reference to the entirety of the story. So Natalie, you're saying like it is the way and it's just a continuation of the way. So if you think about like Sleeping Beauty, if at the conclusion he just goes and saves the princess, that's fine, but it's because of the entire backstory is what makes the conclusion what it is, right? And it's like the conclusion is what it is because of what happened in order to get there. And so I think that is, I think that you're spot on, Natalie, in saying that it will be continuation, it's bringing down, but I also think that there's this element of elevating up because of everything that has already been passed, if that makes any sense at all.
No, that makes sense.
So I do agree with Jason. I think it's both.
Are you
Well,
bringing-
elevating up, that's different than like. Is that different? I'm sorry.
It
Why-
sounds like the difference between, it sounds like we're asking, is it that you're bringing heaven down or you're bringing the earth up towards heaven? Maybe
I-
is that what you?
I don't know that that's necessarily what I meant. I think I'm more because I feel like well, I don't know. Actually, I don't know. Maybe that is what I meant. I don't know. I'm confused. I think I was thinking like I guess it is bringing it down if it's a continuation.
That's what I thought you were saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess it would be well, it wouldn't be bringing it down, it would be meeting you where you are, and it would be similar to like the story that you were telling about like having to like entering a heavenly realm, and then I mean same as Fantastes, entering a new realm and
Yeah.
then learning how to adapt, because like that I mean that's kind of what we'll be doing. We'll all of a sudden just be in an entirely new environment. And are we just gonna just like God's just gonna go, here's the knowledge for how to make it through this place? You know, it's like I think it will be. I guess it will be bringing it down. So I get what you mean. I stand by my point. Bring down.
I keep thinking about like coming into your inheritance, and I know that you guys are not like to the chapter in Fantastes where he like realizes, hey, like the place he's been exploring, and he finally comes to, or the fairyland that he's been exploring, then he finally comes to this palace, and he recognizes that this palace is his. I don't know where I was going with that, but that idea of coming into your inheritance, I was just thinking of like coming home. Like even when you come home, like the chores don't stop. Like it's fine, it's a place of rest, but like you still have to you still gotta get the washboard out and scrub, and it's like, but there's also like a deep satisfaction that can come from like, I don't even know, like a well-functioning homestead. I don't know. I'm definitely thinking about like literally just like the farm. Like the chores don't stop. You got to keep doing your chores, but like there's a deep joy and satisfaction that can come from participation in those chores, because like you are now participating in the way that you were meant to as a steward of the gift that you've been given.
Mm.
So it's like you're now participating in this perpetual state of gratitude that reveals the fullness of the reality of the goodness of God's gift, and that's your inheritance. So it's like, but also I like the idea of God just moving into the neighborhood too. So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah. I just read that part. He hasn't done anything yet. He hasn't been very helpful, but like he like got to the palace and like is in his room or whatever. So he's not done anything very useful yet. But I think that's a really good example, because it is kind of like where the familiar meets the unfamiliar, where he's like able to find his own room in an entirely like unfamiliar territory and like look out the window and there's something new. And it's just like a continual state of learning while also being in like, and I think there's something to that, like the combination of the two. You just need the yin and yang of everything to be satisfied. Because even in our lives like daily, like I think if I'm gonna like do something insane and like be away from like Jason, if I'm gonna move to India for 6 months, I need to know that I'm gonna have something familiar with me. So I'm gonna bring like certain things that I know that I'll want. Like I'm gonna bring my banjo because this is familiar. So the moments that I feel overwhelmed, I can have this with me and it'll make me satisfied. You know, there's just like that balance, like the yin and yang of both, that I think that's the only way that you can really get there. And that idea of like coming to a castle that's like you inherited, but it's all unfamiliar. But then you find like this one room and you're like, oh,
Yeah. And you don't lose your particularity.
mm-mm.
That's a really good point to emphasize. I think that even definitely maps onto what Mitch is saying as well, as like, even in rest, if you go home or you're at your house, it's not really a repose or a stasis. It doesn't just like, and there's a movie I was watching, I can't remember what it was, and this girl was going to explore space, kind of like what we're talking about, this further out and further in, and she was I can't remember what it was. It wasn't too long ago. But then she said, when she had told her, oh, maybe it was Lost in Space, maybe that was it. I was watching that show, and the mom character said she told her mom, this grandmotherly figure, of like she was going to go into space and explore and just explore the expanse and further up and further in. And her grandmother responded, well, who's going to take care of the farm? And I don't know why, as soon as that line popped up, that just stood out to me so much. I was like, touche, grandma. Like you need this place of comfort. Like who's gonna, like, are you gonna eat space food the rest of your life? What if it storms out there? Like what if you go out in the woods and it starts raining on you? It's nice to be able to go home and get a hot cooked meal by the fire, and someone does have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's Jesus, right? He's going to prepare a place for us. We
Yeah.
get to explore.
You don't have to do anything when we get there.
We give the torch to Jesus.
Yeah.
No, just kidding.
It almost one in all the stories we tell a lot of stories, and most of them, the hero never goes home, or the home is damaged in some way that they'll never be able to recover it. It's shattered. I wonder if there's an alternate version of the Christian story where Christ went to hell, right? Or he never came back.
I'll tell you what I think. I think he's still there and in heaven. But that's just because I think he's eternal, and he that's just how I picture it now. I've gotten so weird. But I'm like, I don't understand how something spiritual can't touch both places at once, like the story of Christ, it has to be in hell, or it can't meet you there, like, because that's where people find it,
Yeah,
So I'm
no, I
like,
think you're right. That would, and I think it's more powerful if you would have read The Inferno by Dante. I think it would have been a better story if he saw Jesus in hell.
But what is hell? Is it the absence of God? I actually don't know.
Okay. I wrote this little thing a while back. To me, I think it's just it's like bitterness, pride, self-righteousness. It's because if love is like the eternal self-sacrificial force, then it would be whatever is opposite that to me, which is very dualistic way of thinking, and is probably maybe not right, but it would be constantly choosing yourself, exalting yourself over the other, over another person. So I wrote this thing a while back, and I basically just wrote, I think John's read it. It was just maybe a few paragraphs, and it's titled Heaven, and it just goes through and it lists off all this beautiful imagery. And then it says, there was like, I began to look at the flowers, and they weren't moving, and there was no wind. And it was just total solitude. Like, you have everything you want, everything you can imagine, but you're alone because you chose yourself, because you're so self-righteous. And so, because that's all self-righteousness. If you continue in it, it just continually scapegoats the other, that you can put yourself above them, because you have to keep justifying yourself by sacrificing something else until you're literally just left in all alone. And to me, that would be hell. And I don't, and it's like an eternal cycle. It's eternal in that it's a cycle you can live in, and you can live in that cycle of just
Mm-hmm.
Do you think
growing that and expanding that, or you can get out of it. Yeah.
do you think that like, because if it's like if it's a state of being, like say like your hell in your state of being is hatred, and that's like what, or does it have to be pride? Or can it just, like, if I just pick something, like if I picked like, I'm just okay, track with me and then tell me if I'm wrong. So if I picked hatred, and like that was my state of being and that was my hell because I was like, I choose this. Where my hatred stemmed from was from my anger, and God gave me that. So in that way, is Christ with me in my hell because he first gave me anger and I mistreated it and turned it into hatred?
This is just like the glass slippers.
In what
Because,
way?
well,
How
it's just
so?
it's just like the glass slippers because, well, you could think of it as hell is a place that you can open a door to, and the doors are everywhere.
Mhm.
It's like the glass slipper in
Mhm.
the sense that the potential for it is always there, and once it's none of the doors are locked. It's just you can bring hell on, like, you know, it's easy.
Mhm.
I personally don't see hatred as ungodly. Like, I think it can be. Like, I think it's like you're talking about, Natalie. Like, if it stems from the wrong place, or if you misplace it, it can. We've seen it destroy lots of stuff. But I mean, in Psalm 139, that one, I know, like it ends with this weird part where it says like, David says, "I hate your enemies with perfect hatred." And
Yeah.
I'm just like, and he like repeats, do I not hate your enemies? I hate them with perfect hatred. And then that's when I'm
Yeah.
like, but then
But if you
like,
think of even pride though, that comes from, that you could say that stems from self-worth, which is not a bad thing.
Mm.
And in that way, did God give you your self-worth? And then you
yeah,
twisted it in a way that created pride and entrapped you in your own hell. But he's still there with you in that because he first created that in you.
yeah, that's kind of the garden thing, right? Because it's he has to give you in giving you your own will, he gives you your own freedom to choose yourself. But then he almost wants you to choose yourself because that gives you your own identity. Like, it kind of gets in the idea with like the narcissistic God. Like, he could have just made a bunch of robots that look like himself, but he wanted to, like, love wants to love the other. So he
Mhm.
has to let you, like almost choose your own identity or miss the mark. I don't know. It's strange. It's a strange thing I haven't fully wrapped my mind around yet. So I don't know. But I think it's related to what you're asking. Is it, or is it not?
Mm.
Okay.
Hmm.
I don't know. Could we bring it, what you're asking? Could we bring it into very immediate family parallels somehow
What do you mean?
to get it more understandable? Whatever the question is you're asking, because it seemed to me like the question you're asking is like, um, I don't know.
Uh, uh,
I was saying like maybe
family,
parent child relationship to get at the question more.
yeah. I guess so. Okay, so like if I'm trying to imagine, I'm trying to think of something really simple. Um, if like if your dad was like, "Hey, I got you this oh my gosh, no, this is really hard actually." I'm having a really hard time coming up with something that's more permanent in my mind. I was like, okay, what can your parent give you that could be used for good, but then you could use it for bad, and then and then harm yourself in some way, and then your parent has to sit with you with it. So I was gonna go with a boomerang.
I have an example.
Then yeah, go Gray.
When I was 6 years old, my younger brother was 5, and we were going to go hiking with my dad. And we went to Target, and he bought us these pocket knives because you need a pocket knife if you're going to be in wilderness. And we drove up to the trailhead, and we got out of the car. And my brother opened his knife, and he put his thumb against it, and he cut his thumb. And we had to drive back and get stitches, and we didn't get to go hiking.
Yeah.
That's a great example.
And then your dad sat with him while he got stitches.
He did.
That is great. That is a great example. I'm just thinking how that, like, now I'm mapping that onto like the story of entire humanity, and it's like it's like you have Adam, and it's like, here's his pocket knife. Don't. Oh,
It almost feels. I'm gonna take it on a really dark turn, but it almost feels like if your dad gave you a pocket knife and then you chose to self-harm with it, and then he chose to walk with you through that. That feels like kind of equivalent, because then you're actively doing something purposefully to harm yourself because you just can't help it. Whereas like if you just slice your thumb open, I guess it was kind of an accident on your brother's part, and you were probably resentful towards him for that. But I don't know. I guess that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like if someone gives you something like a tool and then you mistreat it, I guess to see God as someone who will walk with you through hell is to see a parent who's willing to walk with you through the hell that we know in our world.
yeah. What would you do? Here's a question. What would you do if your dad, what would your dad do if he gave your brother the knife and your brother started to just repeatedly stab you? Like, would he walk with your brother through that? Like, does God walk with Cain? Does he continue to try to get Cain back to the garden, or does he just say, nope, kaputs, you're out?
I think there are some things that are perhaps not. We keep using the word walk throughable. It's like there's some things that are irreparably.
Yeah.
Like once you cut your thumb, we're not going hiking. You know, once you stab your brother, the trip is over.
yeah. Because he does push him further out of the mountain, but I don't know that he ever says you'll never make it back. In that state of stabbing your brother, you sure won't be allowed back in the house, I'm sure. But I don't know.
But some parents do that.
Whatever.
Like there are kids that like flip their lids and attack their siblings, and they send them away, but not with the idea that they're not coming home, with the idea of like, I'm gonna like work. I mean, I'm like, now I'm like kind of in those kind of environments where for my job, but like those parents are like, I'm gonna work with my kid and I'm gonna get them in a better state of mind. And in that, they're walking with them through even that, them being like Cain and attacking like their family or attacking someone else, you know, like they're like still willing because they can see that there's something on the other side. But it's almost like, I don't know, because part of me is like, in that way, you're walking through it with them mentally, but you're not always physically represented there. And is that kind of maybe what God does with hell? It's like he's walking through it with us, but not physically there. And he's just like, I can see you on the other side. But I don't think so. I think he's probably physically there. I said that and I immediately regretted it.
Maybe that's why. Well, maybe Jason, that's why you said that you think he is in hell and heaven at the same time.
Yeah.
Because he's with you in both places.
Yeah.
What about like you live in a world with knives? So your parent gives you access to the knife. And then the freedom is yours now to do what you will with that knife. And we're hoping, or at least the parents hoping, that you take on, a certain sense of responsibility with that knife, because you recognize the gravity, or you have reverence for the capacity of the knife. And then, yeah, I guess, like, I don't know how I'm gonna relate this to what you guys are talking about, actually. But
Curious.
Following.
that the shoot. It's getting too late.
What happens with the knife?
But like he has to, I mean, the knives are there, so like the right thing to do is to just give the knife no matter what the child does with the knife, and so, like, the responsible thing for a parent to do, or like you're going to extend your kid's curfew as the kid gets older, and the kid hopefully knows how to take that freedom into their growing sense of responsibility and make wise decisions with that later curfew. But it's like, ultimately, when they're an adult and they move out and they make their own home, there is no curfew, but now they've developed that sense of responsibility. What does this have anything to do with it?
I'm tempted to say that what you're describing is analogous to the Cinderella curfew.
Yes.
And you're saying we live in a world of knives. We live in a world of sharp objects and soft bodies. We live in a world of glass slippers.
Mhm.
And given that we live in a world of knives, you should be exposed to the knife intentionally, not stumble upon it, be given it, say, here it is, use it wisely.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's what I was trying to say,
Good job, Craig.
You're generous, man.
Tied it together. What you got something to say, Natalie? You got an expression on your face.
No, I was just trying to imagine a way that we could tie this back to magic mirrors. So you could title your podcast Magic Mirrors, because that's what we said we were going to talk about, and then see if we can circle it back around.
Who's this magic mirrors? Hmm.
And that's the reference to Fantasties.
All right.
Sort of.
On a different occasion, I'm sure it's a large topic. On a different occasion, maybe it's interesting to talk about why the brittle thing, the fragile thing, always has an effect on your vision. It's reflective or transparent, or it has these kind of strange optical properties.
Hmm.
But it's probably more than we're.
The brittle thing that was brought up at the very beginning.
Yes, but the magical mirror.
Right.
All mirrors are magic mirrors. What do you mean? Like looking through a glass? Looking through a glass, or looking like in a reflection? Well, I guess it'd be the same. I guess you're right. It would.
Well, there's Cosmos mirror, and there's this. What is it? The globe. There's all these.
Mhm.
There's all these perfect objects, but they all have optical properties. It seems tied together in some way, but I don't know.
Wow. Yeah, I think there's definitely something to that. Yeah, immediately my mind jumps to and I don't know how I'm gonna tie this in, but is scripture where it says, Lord, teach me to number my days that I may gain a heart of wisdom. I think my favorite psalm is oh God, and he says the same thing. It says, Lord, make me to know my end that I may see how frail I am.
Mhm.
So I think maybe that's the brittleness of life, the fragility of life, brings about this like increasing wisdom. At least just for me, because that's the times when I seem like I get stuff done when I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna live to next year. I'm like, I gotta get be a little bit productive. But that's probably that's just me. Like I said before, I think like sometimes I get that seasonal thing where fall comes around and I'm like, everything's dying. I'm gonna die too. I just don't. I had to move inside and I left all my books out there.
It is interesting, like when you begin to like, I don't want to say like pursue fragility or like those fragile states of, or fragile seasons or whatever, but those are the seasons that you're saying might bring about, if you recognize that those have been the most productive seasons of your life, like you realize you don't want this constant sense of security and well-being and fortification, because like then you never end up getting twisted up enough to actually make the changes you should or whatever.
Or we can take things for granted as well too. Just yeah.
Well, in that way it feels like breaking your mirror is, it's like just gonna happen. Like it's just like your mirror is just gonna be broken, and it's gonna change the perspective of it, because when a mirror shatters, it changes the image. And ultimately, when you look at the frame, it doesn't save the mirror from being shattered. It's like we live our life by rules. It doesn't mean that the mirror is still not going to be shattered in some way. And all that does is really change your perspective. That could be totally off base.
Wait, why is it inevitable for it to be shattered? I'm just trying to track with that thought.
Well, it was something that Luke just said, and now I kind of lost it. But it was like, I guess just like this idea that like life is, I don't know. It's like it's undeniable that like things are gonna happen in your life, and it's gonna affect the image. I don't know, and I don't even know that it necessarily shatters, but like, and I feel like ultimately it's still your choice. Like I feel like if you're gonna break your mirror, or if you're gonna crack your mirror, even like that's still your choice, because if the mirror is your state of mind, then like whatever happens during life, you have the choice whether or not you're gonna let that crack your mirror and change the image. But regardless, the frame is kind of stupid, but like it's still there, and
Right.
it's like it's holding the mirror in place, and so we need it, but also it doesn't protect the mirror in any way.
It's a good point.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to say something that's nonsense.
Sure.
I don't know how quite to relate to the frame. I think you're totally right. When you're in a let's say a house of mirrors. Let's say you're at the store and you're in the changing room and you have the mirrors all around you. You can see things that you can't see in any other setting.
Yeah,
You
I
can
hate
see
that.
the back of yourself. You can see yourself from angles you can never, like impossible angles. So you're kind of like when you're in this place, you're all seeing.
Yeah.
Or if you're in a glass house, you're all seeing in a different way because you can see beyond the boundary in every direction. But when you're in a setting like this, it's like when things are going so right, when things are so perfect, and you know, everything is clear. There's infinite ways for things to go wrong. Do you know what I mean? Like the fragility is kind of a function of.
Wow, there's something to that. Gonna have to chew on that for a while.
That's a really good thought.
Yeah, is it because there's no frames? Because in a glass house, you don't really have a frame to
To contain it.
yeah, like a threshold. Like it's almost like you're living in a bubble, and the bubble's very fragile or something. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? What I'm getting at? Um,
Hmm.
I think it could be, Jason, the lack of frames, but also just the increase of mirrors. So your increase of visibility.
uh-huh. Yeah.
Like the more mirrors that there are, the more you can see, but also the more that you can see, the more delicate it becomes.
Huh.
Which is a pretty intuitive way to describe humility.
Mm.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. I never thought about that. Yeah, because when when you have the frame, like my mind with frames, I kept thinking about like the details of the frame. Like you can carve whatever you want in it. Like it would be different if I had a frame on the wall and had a mirror. If I had a bunch of gargoyles and like creepy things carved in the mirror, it'd be different than if it was like a golden frame or something like that. You could frame it however you want and it changes your perception. But sorry, getting back to the humility thing is like if you're looking through a frame, it's almost like yeah, things are boxed in, so you have to remain humble for everything that's outside of your frame because you're like, I don't see whatever it is out there. But then even in the room of mirrors or the glass house, it's like you have to almost be more humble because you're like, this is
Huh.
yeah, the fragility of it or something, or the you realize how small you are. I don't know. Yeah, there's this humility. I get what you're trying to get at.
But so does this have anything? So humility, vanity, mirror, like
On the nose.
but
Nice.
I don't know. I don't know. Like it's weird because like the mirror is a weird one. Like I was having a conversation with folks yesterday and it's like the mirror is not a place where like it's a place of like self-possession, but at the same time like it also is like a or it informs. I don't even know what I'm trying to get at, but like I don't. What if you don't always feel good when you look in the mirror, or you don't even see yourself clearly because whatever it could be like a dysmorphia or whatever. Is that the right word?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And so like it can actually like it can actually like there's a weird way in which it can like both in it can make you self-possessed but also like completely shattered like in your own understanding of yourself. I guess is like you I don't even know.
It's kind of subjective.
Yeah, or like I guess I'm just trying to figure out like there's that weird thing where like the narcissist who constantly is looking in the mirror is looking in the mirror constantly, not because they're obsessed with
Mm.
themselves, because they don't know who they are. And so there's this deep insecurity within them, and that's why they keep on looking in the mirror because they're trying to figure out who they even are. And
Hmm. That's something bizarre there because if you have a kind of dysmorphia and you're looking in the mirror, you're not seeing yourself, you're seeing your own vision.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Wow, that's
To- This is backing up a step, but like going back to like this idea of like endless mirrors. I was thinking about like I don't know if it was Jason. Someone was talking to me about the first mirror, which is just like a body of water. Like if you see yourself in the river, that's like the first reflection that man ever, like man had never seen himself until he looked in a river. And like rivers are still in a frame. They're still framed by like, you know, the
Oh.
dirt, the rocks, whatever. You get to the ocean's still in a frame. But you feel like the more like mirror substance, which I guess would be water, that you have, the smaller you feel. And like that same idea of like endless mirrors, I guess, is like humbling. Or even like when you're in one of those stores and you have mirrors all over from every angle, it's a humbling experience. Like I get what, like if there's not like a frame, then I guess you kind of I guess it doesn't, it's not necessarily chaos unless you're thinking of like the flood. I don't know what that means.
Mm.
I guess maybe that would be chaos, because
What
then
are-
there's frame.
What are the positives and the negatives of self-reflection?
Reminds me of Simba. I don't know why. I just always, whenever we get into this, I always get that the part where he goes
Looks
and he
in the
sees,
water.
yeah, he sees his father. He
Mirror.
lives.
Yeah.
He lives in you.
It reminds me of High School Musical too. There's
What
a scene
happens?
where, well, Troy also looks into a river when he's singing, and it's clearly CGI'd, but it's a really good moment. Anyway,
Is that in bed on it?
yeah.
Yeah. I know it.
What about like the spirit hovering over the face of the deep?
Hmm.
Oh, that's
The face of the
interesting.
waters.
Yeah. What's going on there?
Mm.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. And he says, "Let there be
Reflection.
light," and you can't really have the reflection without the light, until the light begins to hit the waters.
Mhm.
That's weird.
This is interesting. This is like, I'm going to say something that doesn't make any sense.
Good. You sound
You
like
have,
me.
well, we've talked about water and chaos, and water has this kind of dual aspect where on one hand it's murky and it's chaotic, but it's also life-giving because you can draw anything, you can draw benefit out of it. And it feels like the mirror is almost like you take the water and you cut its essence in half, and you've captured the essence of it, that is, you've taken the murkiness away
Yeah.
to where it's nothing but yielding. Do you know what I mean? It's only
Mm.
it's pure stillness.
Is this kind of like the waters above and the waters below? Could you compare that? Like because you said one's chaotic, bitter. The ocean is not drinkable. It doesn't really give life. And then the heavenly waters above, the rainwater is that what you mean when you say yielding? Like it evaporates. It
Yielding as in it's only you've taken its negative aspect away.
Mhm.
yeah. Which is kind of what happens when water evaporates, right, from the
But-
ocean. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a scientist.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting too is like when you referenced like light, because I don't think like the chaos of water loses its meaning when you don't have light, but I think mirrors do. Like if you can't see in a mirror, touching it's
Right.
not going to do anything to you. It's not going to help you in any way. But like if it doesn't, if you still have the chaos of water, viewing that as still like a form of reflection, then like light doesn't matter. I don't know if there's anything that's special about that. I was just throwing that idea out
No, that's
there.
good.
It's a really good
Well,
point.
so like Luke asked, what are the pros and cons of self-reflection? And you already touched on dysmorphia, right? And it seems, because I feel like I haven't been saying much this entire conversation because we've had so many topics. I've been trying to tie it all together. I've like been trying to absorb a lot, and I haven't really known where my mind's at. But it seems that a pro of self-reflection could only happen when when the mirror is correct and unbroken and it is well lit.
Yeah.
That's the only time that self-reflection that's when you would get an objective
Huh.
measurement back, right? Because the issue is self-reflection is subjective. And I was thinking, well, how can you avoid having your own projections or your own visions projected onto the self-reflection as to what comes out of the mirror?
Mm,
But I think the criteria of having it be well lit and having the proper mirror
mm.
fix that issue. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, this is it feels really similar to these laws of fairyland where you have all the laws are very conditional. You can only pull the sword from the stone if if you're worthy. If maybe this is a silly thing to say, but it feels like a mirror under the right conditions is totally different than a mirror under the wrong conditions.
Right. That's where my head was at too.
Yeah.
And is it the mirror's fault or is it the observer? Does it matter like the health of the observer? I don't know.
I don't know. There was a mirror at my old workplace that made me look really tall, and I was always really confused when I would look in it. And so sometimes I think it's the mirror. I don't know.
Funhouse mirrors.
Yeah, even though
Yeah, mirror. I mean,
designed to confuse you.
But then, Natalie, I would say that it's your fault for like you knew that mirror was malfunctioning, right? You knew
That's
that wasn't the case. And so it was your fault for looking into that mirror over and over and over again.
Why do I keep thinking of Instagram and selfies?
Yeah,
Is
I mean
there-
that makes.
No,
sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, but I mean, like Instagram makes sense. You're like putting out a reflection of yourself, but it's almost like it is like a magic mirror. You're only
It is.
projecting the things that you want others to see. You're only projecting like your best images.
Mhm. And the filters you can put on it, like you could do a rose colored filter if you're feeling the mood.
well, there's also beauty filters.
you
There
go.
are.
There you
Mhm.
go. There you go.
And there's memories and there's
You know, I don't know how this ties in. Maybe you guys can tie it in better for me. This is just where my mind went when you were talking about the thing being well lit. Because I wrote this thing a while back, but I wish I could remember exactly what it was. But it basically was saying we don't care, and maybe this is just my personal opinion, but we don't really care about the moon when all her imperfections, when she's reflecting the fullness. Like we look at the full moon and you see all these blemishes and spots, and she's reflecting the light of the sun, but we don't really care, or at least I don't. I'm still like almost entranced by it and fascinated by it. So like with the beauty filters on Instagram, it's like there's this atonement, right? A covering up. That's kind of what atonement is. It's a covering, and you're covering up the blemishes. But then I'm like, with the moon, I mean, I don't know where I'm going with this thought. That's just where my mind went. The moon, like I don't even see them, even though they're there, or I almost appreciate them for what they are. I don't know. I don't know what I'm getting at with that. Just random thought. Just
It is
thought
kind of
of-
it's an interesting thought though, because like then like you're kind of like the sun and all mirrors are the moon, because you can't ever look at yourself and you're never supposed to look at the sun unless you're in India because there's so much smog. But other than that, like you can't look at the sun ever, and you can never look at yourself. So like you're the sun. That has literally nothing to do with what you're saying, but it was just a stupid thought.
That is interesting. I never thought of it that way before, because I always thought of God as being the sun, and you can't look at directly at God without looking at his creation, kind of thing, his reflection. That's kind of, but I'd never thought about your own self, thyself being the sun. That is interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
This is interesting because the moon, when the moon is, you're making a really great point. When the moon is perfectly reflective, it's also perfectly illuminated because it's veiled, right? If it's not full, it's veiled. And it's similar to, Natalie, you're describing the water. Let's say you're looking at a puddle, or you were looking at a body of water that's perfectly still. If it wasn't perfectly still, you couldn't see the bottom. And so when it's perfectly still, you can both see through it perfectly, but also see off of it perfectly. Do you know what I mean? Like they both have the moon, the full moon, and the still water have this thing in common, where you're seeing through them,
Mhm.
and they're perfectly reflective and also perfectly transparent.
Yeah.
Wow. It's one of those things like you just drop it and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to be chewing on that. It's like I don't know what to say.
Yeah,
like
I agree.
I'm gonna have to be chewing on that for a while. That's really good.
I feel like this is definitely one of those ones where you rewatch and you're like, "Damn."
Yeah. And then I hear everybody else. That usually happens with me. I hear everyone else talk. And I'm like, oh, that's so good. That's so good. Then I hear my own voice. And I'm like, God, you moron. Like, how did you derail this great conversation?
I know, but then you
just-
always send it to me and you're like, I did terrible. And I'm like, you did fine. Literally, you stayed on topic the whole time.
Yeah.
Sorry, I dropped off for a second.
I feel bad because I feel like I talked a lot in this podcast. Sorry about it.
You should be ashamed.
No, that
No,
was
I'm just
good,
kidding.
Natalie. I
I'm
feel like I
joking.
didn't talk enough. I was
didn't
trying to
either.
track.
You didn't. Be
I never
ashamed.
really got over the entire first paragraph that we read. I was like trying to tie that in with everything.
I know. That's when I got quiet too, because I was like, how does this all come together?
I know.
With the
Yeah.
Cinderella
Mirrors,
slippers.
I mean, mirrors are something that you don't want to break. I don't know.
Bad luck, right?
I think so.
7 years. Yeah.
Yeah, we touched on a lot, but I feel like it kind of all ties in because even
It all kind of does.
Getting
tie in.
back-
Oh,
now
we
we're
didn't
talking.
touch on two-way mirrors. How we feel about those?
Yeah, that's weird. It's a little weird.
Spooky.
But I feel like it might even tie into the especially when we were mentioned talking about even Christ earlier and trying him being the way and being something we're reflective of. And now that even gets into everything we're talking about now with the moon and the still waters and all that.
We
So
can tie that
there.
in.
It's all tied together.
That was
Yeah.
good.
Magic mirrors.
Oh my gosh, is it?
Say it.
No,
Say it.
well-
Say it. Leave us
Do it.
with another one.
The two-way mirror. I was saying something earlier that didn't make it. Remember when I was saying about the water having its essence cut in half?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Well, the two-way mirror seems like the still water or the moon being cut in half,
Yeah.
because it's both. I mean, those things are both perfectly transparent and perfectly reflective, but the two sides of the two-way mirror is like that, where it's one only has one property and one only has the other property.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's. I'm just saying nonsense.
No, that's true.
It feels like that.
Yeah, that's true.
Now I'm gonna have to chew on two-way mirrors a lot too.
Did you guys see that movie, Another Cinderella Story? Not a Cinderella Story, another Cinderella Story. There's a whole dance
I
number
missed that one.
with a two-way mirror, and I think we should all watch it after this.
We should.
Another Cinderella.
I think we should.
Yeah, it's got Selena Gomez in it. So
No, well, I know what
Hey.
I'm doing tonight.
Same. Bookmark to anybody who talks to Cal Rivet. He's really interested in Chris Langan, who talks about, he has this model of everything that is split into two semi-models. I'd be curious to hear what Cal would say about the two-way mirror and if it relates to semi-models. Maybe that's a bad question.
No, it's a good one. I can probably give you his number or something too if you want to text him. He might watch this though and leave a comment. Although I don't know.
We'll tag
Sometimes
it
they'll
and
just-
put a
yeah.
timestamp.
Yeah. I'll tell him you mention him, and I won't tell him when, so I'll have to watch the entire
the
thing.
whole thing.
Just be like, how long? I mean, it's got to be like at least 2 hours, probably 3 at this point.
I think it's about 3.
Tag
3
him and
hours.
Mitch.
And
You were
Mitch.
bashing Mitch left and right. Just kidding.
Yeah, I will. I'll say Mitch. I told Mitch. I told Mitch I'd try to name drop him in every video. I don't know if I've been doing it though, but
Yeah.
yeah. I wasn't bashing him. I said it was good what he had to say
Yeah.
about
you
rest
did.
not being stasis. But
No, and I'm really
should
glad that you
bash him.
brought that up too, because I think that that was a whole different insight than us as a collective had, and I
Yeah.
think that really added. So that was good.
I
Thank
don't
you,
know
Mitch.
If that
Yeah,
jerk
thanks,
wouldn't have
Mitch.
skipped tonight, he should have showed up.
Thanks, Mitch.
Yeah.
All right, thanks,
This
Mitch.
was really fun.
This was really fun.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining, Luke.
Luke, I'd never met or talked to you before. I feel like you
Yeah,
have
neither
really,
have
really
I.
Yeah, me
wonderful
either.
points, man. I feel like
I was great to see. I feel like I came in and I didn't like introduce
That's
myself.
fine.
Yeah,
to
you jumped
anybody.
right in.
I was just like,
I didn't
Well,
know that you
well,
didn't know anybody else.
I didn't
oh, I
either.
really did.
Yeah. We were trying when you came in right after we were trying to find John's skateboarding video, which Luke also skateboards, but probably a little better than
This is
John.
not a
little
bit of
different.
God skateboarding.
A little different.
I
It's
can't
not?
stress that enough. No.
I've got my YouTube
Okay.
channel is just all old skate videos of me when I was
Oh,
little.
that's cool.
I
yes.
love it.
Go through that if you want. I've got one that is Napoleon Dynamite tray flip trick tip. It's pretty good.
Oh,
That's
I love it.
amazing.
I'll send it
Where
to you.
Where do you live, Luke?
Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Okay, I thought so. It was brighter there a lot later than
Okay.
here.
Wait, is everybody in? Because I know, Jason, you're in Tennessee. I don't know where anybody else is.
I'm also in Tennessee.
Okay.
I'm like
South
an
Carolina.
South Carolina,
Texas.
Texas. Gotcha. No. Cool.
Cool. It was nice to meet you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was nice to meet you. I really thought everyone knew you except for me, so I was going to introduce myself at the end.
Well, it's good to meet
That's so goofy. I love it.
I got Adam, Mitch, Natalie, Jason. Did I say all your names correct?
Wait,
Oh, I'm
No.
John.
Oh, God, why did I say
Mine's definitely John.
Mitch isn't here.
Mitch is gone.
Yeah, Mitch is gone.
You just talk about Adam so much.
Does it not I think over on the
First
right,
man?
you click on participants on the Zoom thing, and then it should have all their names in case you so you don't have to embarrass yourself next time.
No, that was embarrassing.
That was like really off.
You could've
So
just-
I wanna know who-
I'm pretty sure you named more people than are actually here.
Well, Luke, yeah, there's like 7 people on that list. I'm Craig and John is here. I want to know who's Adam and who's
Craig, I don't want to be Mitch.
we've got.
John, I called John Adam.
I almost
I'm with me.
can't believe you did that because it was like comically like, yeah, the gang's all here. We've got Thomas, Jackie, and Judy.
I thought he was joking. You were- Oh my
Like
god.
somehow played into it. Man, the intuition is sometimes on fire.
Funny.
Okay,
Oh,
well,
man.
I should get going. I'll see you guys later.
All right, see, I'm gonna go too, I guess. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Good night, guys.
Send us your skateboarding video. We need your skateboarding video.
I'll try to find it for the next time. We'll have to do at least one more chat before Jason
Don't-
leaves.
Don't
All right.
try, John. Succeed.
Yeah, seriously.
No, I will. I will have it for next time.
Okay.
Good night, you guys.
Good night.
Adam
Good night,
out.
Mitch. Good night, Adam.
Good night.